The red dust of Kepler-442b swirled around Lieutenant Jake Morrison as he crouched behind a jagged rock formation. His rifle felt heavy in his hands, and sweat dripped down his face, despite the planet's cold atmosphere. The mission was supposed to be simple: get in, gather intelligence on the Zephyrian research facility, and get out before anyone noticed. "Visual on the target building," whispered Corporal Lisa Hayes through the cum. She lay flat on her belly 50 meters to Jake's left, her sniper rifle trained on the strange blue structure ahead. No movement detected. Sergeant Pete Collins checked his scanner and shook his head. "Something's wrong, Lieutenant. This place should be crawling with Zephyrians, but I'm only picking up minimal life signs." Private Danny Chen shifted nervously. Beside Jake, the kid was new to combat operations, and his hands trembled slightly as he gripped his weapon. Maybe they abandoned it. Jake studied the facility through his binoculars. The building looked like it was made from some kind of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light, typical Zephyrian architecture. But Pete was right. The place seemed too quiet, too empty for an active research station. "We stick to the plan," Jake decided. "Hayes, maintain overwatch. Collins, you and Chen circle around to the back entrance. I'll take point through the front." The team moved with practiced precision. Jake had served with these soldiers for 2 years, and they trusted each other with their lives. The war against the Zephyrians had been going on for 5 years now. Ever since first contact had gone horribly wrong, both sides had been trying to claim the same star system, and negotiations had quickly turned into violence. Jake reached the main entrance first. The crystalline door had been blasted open, leaving sharp edges that glittered in the alien sunlight. Scorch marks covered the walls, and debris was scattered everywhere. This wasn't an abandoned facility. This was a battleground. "Collins, what's your status?" Jake spoke quietly into his cum. "Back entrance is clear. It looks like someone hit this place hard. It's recent damage, maybe hours old." Jake stepped through the destroyed doorway, his rifle ready. The interior of the building was a maze of corridors that curved and twisted in ways that hurt his human eyes to follow. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the air smelled of ozone and something else he couldn't identify. He moved deeper into the facility, checking each room methodically. Most were empty or contained equipment he didn't recognize. Computer terminals flickered with alien text, and strange instruments lay broken on the floor. Whatever research the Zephyrians had been conducting here, someone had wanted it stopped. "Lieutenant, you need to see this." Collins' voice crackled through the cum. "I found something in the back section. Looks like living quarters." Jake made his way toward Collins' position, following the maze-like corridors. He found the sergeant, standing in front of what appeared to be a residential area. Unlike the sterile research sections, this part of the facility had a warmer feel. Soft furniture that molded 2 different body shapes, walls decorated with holographic displays of alien landscapes, and what looked like children's toys scattered on the floor. Families lived here, Jake realized. This wasn't just a research station. It was a colony. Danny's voice came through the cum high with tension. Guys, we've got company incoming. 3 Zephyrian fighters approaching fast from the north." Jake cursed under his breath. Their extraction point was on the other side of the facility. They had maybe 2 minutes before the Zephyrian fighters arrived, and then the place would be swarming with enemy troops. "Everyone converge on the extraction point. Move fast, but stay quiet." Jake turned to leave the residential section. He heard something that made him freeze. It's a soft whimpering sound, like a child crying. It was coming from behind a partially collapsed wall at the far end of the corridor. Every instinct told him to run. The mission was blown, and staying longer would only get his team killed. But that sound pulled at something deep inside him. He had a younger sister back on Earth, and the thought of any child trapped and alone in this devastation made his chest tight. "Jake, where are you?" Lisa's voice was urgent. "Those fighters will be here in 90 seconds. Jake moved toward the sound, climbing over broken debris. Behind the collapsed wall, he found a small alcove that had once been a child's bedroom. And there, huddled in the corner, was a Zephyrian child. She was small, maybe 6 years old, inhuman. Terms with the characteristic crystalline features of her species. Her skin had a pale blue tint, and small crystal formations grew along her arms like natural armor. But her eyes were what stopped Jake cold. They were large and dark, filled with terror and pain. Tears that looked like liquid starlight ran down her face. The child saw Jake and pressed herself further into the corner, making small, frightened sounds. She was clearly terrified of the human soldier pointing a rifle in her direction. Jake slowly lowered his weapon and held up his hands. "It's okay," he said softly, even though he knew she probably couldn't understand him. "I'm not going to hurt you, Jake." Pete's voice exploded through the cum. "The fighters are landing. We need to go now." Through the broken walls, Jake could hear the distinctive whine of Zephyrian plasma engines. In seconds, this place would be full of enemy soldiers looking for whoever had infiltrated their facility. But the child was injured. Her left leg was bent at an odd angle, and she couldn't move. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and moved toward the frightened child. "Come on, little one. We're getting out of here." The sound of running footsteps echoed through the corridors. Zephyrian voices shouted commands in their musical language. Jake scooped up the child, surprised by how light she was. She struggled for a moment, then seemed to realize he was trying to help her. "Jake, what the hell are you doing?" Lisa's voice was desperate now. "I've got a civilian. A child. She's injured." Jake ran through the facility with the alien child in his arms. She clung to him, her small fingers digging into his uniform. Behind them, he could hear the Zephyrian soldiers getting closer. He reached the main corridor, just as a squad of enemy troops rounded the corner ahead. Their plasma rifles were already charging, the distinctive blue glow building toward a lethal discharge. Time seemed to slow down. Jake saw the lead Zephyrian warrior raise his weapon. The energy buildup was massive, enough to vaporize both Jake and the child instantly. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Without thinking, Jake spun around and covered the child with his body, using himself as a human shield. The plasma blast hit him square in the back, and pain beyond description tore through his nervous system. His armor absorbed some of the impact, but the heat burned through to his skin underneath. Jake screamed and fell to his knees. But he kept his arms wrapped around the child. She was safe under his protection, and that was all that mattered. The world went white with pain. He could smell his own flesh burning. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was Lisa's rifle firing from somewhere behind him, the child's voice saying something in her own language that sounded almost like "thank you." Jake woke up face down on a medical bed, his back feeling like someone had poured liquid fire across his skin. The sterile smell of the base hospital filled his nose, and machines beeped steadily around him. He tried to move and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his entire body. "Don't try to get up yet," said a familiar voice. Dr. Amy Foster appeared beside his bed, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired, like she had been working for hours without rest. "You took a direct plasma hit. Your armor saved your life, but you've got second and third degree burns across your back and arms." Jake's throat felt dry and scratchy. The child, the Zephyrian girl. "Is she okay?" Amy smiled for the first time since he had woken up. "She's fine. More than fine, actually. She won't leave your side." Jake turned his head carefully and saw her. The alien child sat in a chair next to his bed, her large dark eyes watching him with intense focus. She was wearing human clothes now, a simple blue jumpsuit that was too big for her small frame. Her injured leg was wrapped in a medical cast, but she looked healthy otherwise. When she saw Jake looking at her, she made a soft sound and reached out to touch his hand with her small fingers. Her skin felt cool and smooth, like polished stone. "We don't know her real name," Amy explained, "but she responds when we call her Kira. One of the translators suggested it might be close to whatever her actual name is." Jake tried to sit up, slowly, gritting his teeth against the pain. Kira immediately stood up and helped him, her small hands surprisingly strong as she supported his arm. She said something in her musical language, and her voice sounded worried. "She's been doing that since we brought you both in 3 days ago," Amy said. "Whenever you showed signs of pain, she would get upset. When your fever broke yesterday, she actually smiled for the first time." 3 days? Jake was shocked. I've been unconscious for 3 days. You nearly died, Jake. That plasma blast should have killed you instantly. The only reason you're alive is because you were wearing the new Mark 7 armor, and even that barely held up. Dr. Ryan Wells entered the medical bay carrying a tablet full of data. The base xenobiologist was a thin man with thick glasses who always looked like he was thinking about something complicated. He stopped when he saw Jake was awake. Lieutenant Morrison, I need to ask you some questions about your interaction with the Zephyrian child. Jake looked down at Kira, who was still holding his hand. What kind of questions? When you protected her during the attack, something unusual happened. We've been monitoring both of you since you arrived, and we're seeing some very strange readings. Ryan pulled up a chair and activated his tablet. Kira's brain activity has been synchronized with yours for the past 72 hours. When your heart rate increases, hers does too. When you were having nightmares, she would wake up at the exact same moment. It's like you're connected somehow. Connected how? We're not sure yet. Zephyrian biology is still largely a mystery to us. But this child seems to have formed some kind of bond with you. She refuses to eat unless you're in the room. She won't let anyone else touch her injured leg, but she lets you examine it without any problem. As if to prove Ryan's point, a medical technician entered the room to check on Kira's cast. The moment he approached, she pressed herself against Jake's side and made a low warning sound. The technician stopped and looked at Ryan helplessly. It's okay, Kira, Jake said gently, took her small hand and guided it toward the technician. He's trying to help you. Kira looked up at Jake's face, studying his expression. Slowly, she allowed the technician to examine her leg, but she kept her eyes fixed on Jake the entire time. When the examination was finished, she immediately returned to her position beside him. That's remarkable, Ryan said, making notes on his tablet. She trusts you completely, but she's afraid of everyone else. Commander Helen Torres walked into the medical bay, her military uniform crisp despite the early hour. She was a tough woman who had earned her position through years of combat experience. She looked like she hadn't slept much recently either. Morrison, good to see you awake. We need to talk. Jake could tell from her tone that this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. What's the situation, Commander? The situation is that we have an enemy combatant in our base, and half my officers want to interrogate her for intelligence. Jake's protective instincts kicked in immediately. She's a child. She can't be more than 6 years old. She's a Zephyrian. Child, Helen corrected. And according to Captain Alex Rivera, she might have valuable information about their research operations. Captain Rivera stepped into the room as if summoned by his name. He was the base's intelligence officer, a man who saw everything as a potential source of information. His cold eyes focused on Kira like she was a puzzle to be solved. The facility you infiltrated was conducting advanced weapons research, Rivera said. This child lived there. She might have overheard conversations, seen documents, observed procedures. That could give us a significant advantage. Absolutely not, Jake said firmly. I won't let you interrogate a traumatized child. You won't let me? Rivera's voice was sharp. Lieutenant, you seem to be forgetting that you're a soldier in the human military, not this creature's guardian. Kira must have sensed the tension in the room because she moved closer to Jake and made a soft whimpering sound. Jake put his arm around her shoulders, and she immediately calmed down. Look at that, Ryan said quietly. Her stress levels just dropped the moment you touched her. This is exactly the problem, Rivera continued. You've compromised your objectivity. This alien has manipulated you somehow. She's not manipulating anyone, Jake shot back. Just a scared child who watched her home get destroyed. We don't know what she is, Rivera insisted. Zephyrians matured differently than humans. She could be much older than she appears. She could be a spy, a weapon, anything. Dr. Amy Foster had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. Captain Rivera, I've examined this child thoroughly. Her bone structure, dental development, and neural patterns all indicate she's genuinely young. Whatever age she is in Zephyrian terms, she's definitely a child. Commander Torres held up her hand to stop the argument. Regardless of her age, we have a bigger problem. Long-range sensors picked up a Zephyrian fleet heading toward our position. They'll be here within 48 hours. The room fell silent. A Zephyrian fleet meant invasion. Bombardment, or worse. But here's the strange part, Torres continued. They're not approaching an attack formation. They sent a message ahead requesting parley. They want to talk. About what? Jake asked. About her. Torres nodded. Toward Kira. God. They want their child back, and they want to meet the human who saved her life. Jake felt Kira's small hand tighten around his. She might not understand all the words, but she clearly understood that people were discussing her fate. What are you going to do? Jake asked. Torres looked tired and uncertain. I don't know. This is unprecedented. The Zephyrians have never requested peaceful contact before. Well, but they're also bringing enough firepower to level this entire base. Ryan was studying his tablet again. Commander, there's something else you need to know. Our scans show that separating Jake and Kira could be dangerous for both of them. Their neural patterns have become interlinked somehow. Forcing them apart might cause severe psychological trauma, or it might break whatever hold she has over him, Rivera added coldly. Jake looked down at Kira, who was watching the adults with frightened eyes. She didn't understand most of what was being said, but she could sense that her safety was being debated. Her small fingers gripped his hand tightly, and he could feel her trembling slightly. Whatever decision you make, Jake said quietly, I want to be part of it. This child saved my life just as much as I saved hers. During that plasma attack, she could have run and left me behind. Instead, she stayed with me. She helped me get to cover after I was hit. How could she help you? Amy asked. She was injured herself. I don't know how, but she did. I remember her small hands guiding me toward the extraction point, even though I could barely see through the pain. No, she's braver than most soldiers I know. Commander Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying both Jake and Kira. The Zephyrian delegation will arrive tomorrow. Till then, the child stays in medical under guard. And Morrison, you're confined to base until we figure out what the hell is happening here. Why is the officers filed out of the medical bay, Jake? Looked down at Kira. She had fallen asleep in her chair, still holding his hand. Whatever was coming, whatever the Zephyrians wanted, Jake knew one thing for certain. He would protect this child with his life, just like he had done in that burning facility, outside the medical bay windows. The alien stars of Kepler-4, for 2b glittered. In the darkness, and somewhere among them, a Zephyrian fleet was approaching with unknown intentions. The Zephyrian shuttle appeared on the horizon like a silver tear in the red sky of Kepler-4 for to be. Jake watched from the medical bay window as the alien vessel descended toward the landing pad with impossible grace. It made no sound, moving through the air as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. Admiral Sarah Blake had arrived from Earth Command 6 hours earlier, bringing with her a team of diplomats, linguists, and enough firepower to level a small city. She was a woman who had earned her rank through decades of military service, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. Right now, those eyes were focused on Jake and the small alien child who refused to leave his side. Lieutenant Morrison, Admiral Blake said as she entered the medical bay. I've read the reports, but I need to hear this from you directly. Tell me exactly what happened during the rescue. Jake shifted carefully in his bed. His burns were healing, thanks to advanced medical treatment, but movement still caused him pain. Kira sat beside him in her usual chair, holding his hand and watching the Admiral with cautious curiosity. There's not much to tell, Admiral. I heard a child crying and went to investigate. When the Zephyrians opened fire, I protected her. Protected an enemy combatant. I protected a child. Admiral Blake studied Jake's face for a long moment. Dr. Wells tells me that you and this child have formed some kind of psychic connection. Is that accurate? Jake looked down at Kira. Over the past day, the bond between them had grown stronger. He could sense her emotions now, feel her fear when strangers approached, share her calm when she felt safe. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Something's happening between us, Jake admitted. I can feel what she feels sometimes. She seems to understand me even when I don't speak. As if to demonstrate, Kira looked up at Jake and made a soft sound. Without being asked, she carefully adjusted his pillow to make him more comfortable. She had been doing things like that all day, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. Fascinating, said Dr. Ryan Wells, who had been observing from the corner. The neural synchronization has increased by 30% since yesterday. Their brain patterns are becoming more aligned every hour. Communications officer burst into the medical bay. Admiral, the Zephyrian shuttle is requesting permission to land. They're broadcasting on open channels in perfect English. Admiral Blake's eyebrows rose. Perfect English? How is that possible? Unknown, Admiral? Voice is female, and she's asking specifically to speak with Lieutenant Morrison. 20 minutes later, Jake found himself in a wheelchair being pushed toward the main conference room. Kira walked beside him, her small hand resting on his arm. She had insisted on coming, and any attempt to separate them had resulted in visible distress for both of them. The conference room had been hastily converted into a meeting space suitable for first contact. Armed guards stood at every entrance, and recording equipment captured everything from multiple angles. Commander Torres, Captain Rivera, Dr. Wells, and a dozen other officers filled the room with nervous energy. Admiral Blake took her position. At the head of the table, bring them in. The doors opened, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. 3 Zephyrians entered the room, but his attention was immediately drawn to the one in the center. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Crystalline formations grew along her arms and shoulders, like natural armor, and her dark eyes held depths that seemed older than time itself. Was clearly a warrior, someone who had seen countless battles and emerged victorious. But when her gaze fell on Kira, her entire demeanor changed. The hard lines of her face softened, and Jake could see love and relief in her alien features. Kira made a sound that was part cry, part song, and tried to stand up from her position beside Jake's wheelchair. The tall Zephyrian took a step forward, then stopped, her eyes moving to Jake with an expression he couldn't read. I am High Warrior Zelenara of the 7th Fleet, the Zephyrian said in flawless English. Her voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. This child is my daughter. Admiral Blake leaned forward slightly. How do you speak our language so fluently? We have been monitoring your communications for years, Zelenara replied. We learn quickly when survival depends on understanding our enemies. Then you know we're at war. Yes, but today, we are not here as enemies. We are here as a mother seeking her child. Zelenara's eyes returned to Kira, who was making soft sounds and reaching toward her mother. But she didn't let go of Jake's hand. My daughter was traveling with our research expedition when your forces attacked the facility, Zelenara continued. In the chaos, she was separated from our group. We've been searching for her for days. Captain Rivera spoke up. That research facility was developing weapons technology. Your daughter was living in a military installation. Your daughter was living in a colony, Zelenara corrected firmly. The research facility was attached to a civilian settlement. Families lived there, including mine. We are not monsters who use children as shields. Jake studied Zelenara's face and saw truth. In her words, the living quarters, he said quietly. That's why there were toys and family spaces. You are the human who protected my daughter, Zelenara said, turning her full attention to Jake. You used your own body to shield her from plasma fire. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Zelenara said firmly, not anyone. It goes beyond simple battlefield mercy. Nearly died to save the child of your enemy. Okay, in our culture, such an act has deep meaning. Dr. Wells looked up from his tablet. What kind of meaning? Zelenara was quiet for a moment, studying the connection between Jake and her daughter. Kira was still holding Jake's hand, but she was also reaching toward her mother with her free arm. Torn between 2 sources of safety and love. My daughter has formed what we call a soul bond with this human, Zelenara said finally. It is rare even among our own people. It occurs when someone proves their willingness to sacrifice everything for another's welfare. Is it permanent? Admiral Blake asked. Always. The bond grows stronger over time, connecting to beings at the deepest level. They will share emotions, thoughts, even physical sensations to some degree. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean for us? It means you are no longer simply a human soldier, and she is no longer simply my daughter. You are connected now, part of each other's existence. To separate, you would cause great pain to both. Captain Rivera looked skeptical. This sounds like a convenient excuse to infiltrate our base with a spy? His crystalline features hardened. You dare suggest I would use my own child as a weapon? We've been at war for 5 years, Rivera shot back. Trust doesn't come easily. Enough. Admiral Blake interrupted. Hi, Warrior Zelenara. What exactly are you proposing? Zelenara straightened to her full height. In our culture, the one who forms a soul bond with a child becomes what we call a shield father. It is a sacred relationship, recognized by our highest laws. This human has become my daughter's shield father, which makes him part of our family. The room fell completely silent. Jake could feel every eye in the room focused on him and Kira. I don't understand, Jake said. According to our laws and customs, you now have parental rights and responsibilities toward my daughter. You are her protector, her guardian, her shield father. And as such, you must come with us to our homeworld to fulfill this role properly. Admiral Blake stood up sharply. You're asking us to turn over one of our officers to an enemy power. I'm asking you to recognize a bond that already exists, Zelenara replied calmly. Look at them. They are already connected. The soul bond cannot be broken or ignored. Jake felt Kira's small hand squeeze his fingers. He looked down at her and saw something that broke his heart. She was looking back and forth between him and her mother, and tears were flowing down her face. She wanted both of them, but she was afraid she would have to choose. What happens if I refuse? Jake asked. Zelenara's expression grew sad. The bond exists whether you accept it or not. If you try to deny it, both you and my daughter will suffer. The connection will become painful. Instead of comforting, you will feel each other's distress constantly, but without the joy that comes from accepting the relationship. Dr. Wells was frantically taking notes. This is incredible. We're witnessing the formation of an interspecies psychic bond. The implications for our understanding of consciousness and connection are enormous. The implications for our military security are what concern me, Admiral Blake said firmly. Hi, Warrior Zelenara. We need time to consider your proposal. Time is something we may not have, Zelenara replied. My daughter is young, and the soul bond is still forming. The longer you delay, the more difficult it will be for both of them. Jake looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. Diplomats, soldiers, scientists, all of them trying to figure out what to do with a situation that had never existed before. But none of them were feeling what he was feeling. None of them had this small alien child's trust and love flowing through. Their consciousness like a warm current. I need to think about this, Jake said finally. Jake spent the night staring at the ceiling of the medical bay, unable to sleep. Kira lay curled up in the bed beside him, breathing softly in what appeared to be peaceful sleep. But Jake could feel her dreams through their connection, and they were filled with images of crystal cities and vast ships sailing between the stars. At dawn, Admiral Blake called an emergency meeting. Jake was wheeled into the conference room to find it packed with more officers than before. General Frank Moore had arrived during the night, bringing with him the weight of Earth Command's authority. His weathered face showed the strain of 5 years of war, and his eyes held no warmth when they looked at Jake. Lieutenant Morrison, General Moore began without preamble. You've created quite a situation here. I saved a child's life, sir. You formed a psychic bond with an enemy alien, the general corrected sharply. Do you understand the security implications of what's happened to you? Dr. Wells cleared his throat. General, with respect, our research indicates that Lieutenant Morrison had no control over the bond formation. It appears to be an automatic Zephyrian biological response to extreme acts of self-sacrifice. Which brings us to our current problem, Admiral Blake said. High Warrior Zelenara has made her position clear. She wants Lieutenant Morrison to accompany her daughter to the Zephyrian homeworld. General Moore's face hardened. Absolutely not. We don't turn over human soldiers to enemy powers. But sir, Dr. Wells interjected, separating them could have serious consequences. The bond appears to be strengthening every day. Yesterday, when we tried to move Kira to a different room for testing, both she and Lieutenant Morrison experienced severe physical distress. Jake remembered that incident clearly. As the moment they had carried Kira away from him, he had felt like someone was tearing his heart out of his chest. The pain had been so intense that he had nearly passed out. Kira had screamed continuously, until they brought her back to his side. That could be psychological manipulation, Captain Rivera suggested. These aliens might be more clever than we think. It's not manipulation, Jake said firmly. Can feel what she feels. Her fear, her happiness, her pain. It's real. General Moore studied Jake with calculating eyes. And what exactly do you feel from her right now, Lieutenant? Jake closed his eyes and focused on the connection. She's scared. She can sense the tension in this room. She wants her mother, but she doesn't want to leave me behind. She's confused about why the adults are upset. As if summoned by his words, Kira appeared in the doorway. She had somehow slipped past the guards and found her way to the conference room. Her small face was streaked with tears, and she ran directly to Jake's wheelchair. How did she get past security? General Moore demanded. She's been doing that, Commander Torres said tiredly. We can't keep her away from Morrison. She seems to know exactly where he is at all times. Kira climbed into Jake's lap and buried her face against his chest. Jake could feel her relief at being close to him again, mixed with anxiety about all the angry voices around them. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Dr. Wells said excitedly. The bond allows them to locate each other across distances. It's remarkable. The conference room doors opened again, and High Warrior Zelenara entered with her two companions. She had requested this second meeting, and Admiral Blake had agreed despite General Moore's objections. I see my daughter has found her shield father, Zelenara said with something that might have been amusement. Children have a way of cutting through diplomatic complexity. High Warrior, Admiral Blake said formally, we need to discuss the practical implications of your request. There is nothing to discuss, Zelenara replied. The soul bond has been established. According to our laws, this human is now part of my family. He has the right to claim protection under Zephyrian law, and my daughter has the right to her shield father's presence. General Moore leaned forward aggressively. Your laws don't apply to human soldiers. They apply to my daughter's shield father, Zelenara said calmly. And they apply to any being who chooses to accept the sacred relationship. What if he doesn't choose to accept it? Admiral Blake asked. Zelenara's expression grew serious. Then both he and my daughter will suffer greatly. The soul bond cannot be broken, only accepted or denied. Those who deny it experience constant pain, both emotional and physical. Eventually, the strain can drive both parties to madness. Felt a chill run through him. How long do I have to decide? The critical period is ending, Zelenara said. Your terms, perhaps another day or two. After that, the bond will either stabilize into something beautiful, or it will become a source of torment. Double quotes, Dr. Wells was furiously taking notes. Exactly happens during stabilization. If accepted, the shield father and child become permanently connected. They can sense each other across vast distances, share emotions and thoughts when needed, and draw strength from their bond. It becomes a source of joy and protection for both. And if denied, the connection becomes corrupted. Instead of sharing joy, they share only pain. Instead of comfort, they feel constant anxiety. The bond remains, but it brings only suffering. Jake looked down at Kira, who was listening to her mother's words with wide eyes. He didn't need to understand her language to know that she was afraid. There's something else you need to know, Zelenara continued. I am not simply a warrior requesting the return of her child. I am the sister of Supreme Commander Tholanara, leader of all Zephyrian forces. The room fell completely silent. General, Moore's face went pale. You're telling us that this child is Zephyrian royalty? Admiral Blake asked. She is the daughter of the Supreme Commander's sister, which makes her a member of the ruling family. Her shield father would hold equivalent status in our society, Captain Rivera spoke up. This changes everything. If we let Morrison go with them, we're essentially giving the enemy one of our officers as a hostage, or we're giving them a bridge between our species, Dr. Wells countered. Think about it. A human with official status in Zephyrian society could be invaluable for future negotiations. General Moore stood up abruptly. This discussion is over. Lieutenant Morrison remains with human forces. We'll find another solution to this bond problem. Kira suddenly made a sharp sound and pressed closer to Jake. Through their connection, he felt a wave of terror wash over her. She had understood enough of the conversation to know that the humans wanted to keep her away from her mother. "You cannot separate them," Zelenara said, her voice carrying a note of warning. "My daughter is already showing signs of distress." Indeed, Kira was trembling in Jake's arms, and he could feel her heart racing through their bond. Her fear was so intense that it was making his own chest tight with anxiety. "We'll sedate her if necessary," Captain Rivera said coldly. Zelenara's crystalline features hardened into an expression of absolute fury. "If you harm my daughter in any way, I will consider it an act of war against my family personally." "You're already at war with us," General Moore pointed out. "This is different," Zelenara said. "This would be a blood debt. I would hunt every person in this room to the ends of the galaxy." Jake had been listening to the argument with growing frustration. These people were talking about Kira like she was a piece of equipment instead of a frightened child. He could feel her terror through their bond, and it was tearing him apart. "Stop," Jake said quietly. Everyone continued arguing. "Stop," Jake shouted, his voice echoing off the conference room walls. The room fell silent. Even Kira looked up at him with surprise. "You're all talking about what's best for your governments, your militaries, your species," Jake said. "But nobody is asking what's best for this child." He looked down at Kira, who was watching him with complete trust. "She's 6 years old. She's been through hell. She watched her home get destroyed, got separated from her family, and nearly died. In the crossfire of a war she doesn't understand, and now all of you are standing here arguing about who gets to control her." Jake's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "I don't care about politics or military strategy or diplomatic advantages. I care about this little girl who trusted me enough to form a soul bond. And if that bond means I have to choose between my species and her well-being, then it's not much of a choice at all." General Moore's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying you'd abandon your duty to humanity for an alien child?" Jake met the general's gaze steadily. "I'm saying I'd do whatever it takes to protect an innocent child, regardless of what species she belongs to. That's what humans are supposed to do. That's what makes us worth defending." Zelenara had been watching this exchange with growing interest. "You would truly choose my daughter's welfare over your own people's wishes?" "I would choose what's right," Jake said simply. Zelenara nodded slowly. "Then perhaps there is another way. In our culture, when the future of a soul bond is in question, we have an ancient ritual called the Trial of Bonding. It would allow you to prove your worthiness as a shield father while demonstrating your commitment to both my daughter and the possibility of peace between our peoples." Admiral Blake leaned forward. "What kind of trial?" "Series of challenges designed to test courage, wisdom, and sacrifice. If he succeeds, the bond stabilizes permanently, and he gains full recognition as my daughter's shield father if he fails." The asteroid station hung in the void between the human and Zephyrian fleets, like a small metal moon. Jake stared out the transport ship's window as they approached the ancient structure. According to Zelenara, the station had been built thousands of years ago by a race that no longer existed. It was considered neutral ground by every species in this part of the galaxy. "You don't have to do this, Captain Maya," Rodriguez said from the seat beside him. She had volunteered to accompany Jake as an observer, along with Sergeant Chris Bennett. Both of them looked worried about what was coming. "Yes, I do," Jake replied. He could feel Kira's emotions through their bond, even though she was back on the human base. She was scared, but trying to be brave for his sake. The connection between them had grown so strong that distance barely mattered anymore. The transport docked with the station, and Jake found himself walking through corridors that seemed impossibly old. The walls were covered with symbols from dozens of different species, carved by travelers who had used this place for diplomatic meetings over the centuries. The trial chamber was a large, circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Zelenara waited in the center, wearing ceremonial armor that glowed with soft blue light. Two other Zephyrians stood beside her, both looking ancient and wise. "Welcome, Shield Father candidate," one of the elders said in heavily accented English. "I am Judge Morthic. This is Judge Velsera." We will oversee your trial. Jake walked to the center of the room, his heart pounding. He had trained for combat his entire adult life, but this was unlike any challenge he had ever faced. The trial of bonding consists of 3 tests, Judge Velsara explained. The test of protection, the test of wisdom, and the test of sacrifice. You must pass all 3 to claim the right of Shieldfather. What happens if I fail? The soul bond will be severed, Judge Morthic said solemnly. Both you and the child will survive, but the connection between you will be destroyed. You will never see her again, and she will never fully trust another protector. Jake thought about Kira back on the base, probably sitting by the communication console waiting for news. The idea of never seeing her again, of breaking the trust she had placed in him, was worse than the thought of dying. I'm ready, Jake said. The first test began immediately. The chamber around Jake dissolved into a holographic simulation so real he could smell the alien vegetation and feel the heat of a foreign sun. He found himself standing in a dense jungle on an unknown world, holding a small bundle that he knew contained a holographic representation of Kira. Survive for 1 hour while protecting the child, Judge Velsara's voice echoed around him. Predators will hunt you. The environment will try to kill you. But the child must remain unharmed. Jake barely had time to orient himself before the first attack came. A creature that looked like a cross between a tiger and a dragon burst from the undergrowth, its claws gleaming in the filtered sunlight. Jake rolled away from its first swipe, clutching the bundle containing holographic Kira against his chest. For the next hour, Jake ran, climbed, fought, and hid. Poisonous plants tried to release spores into his lungs. Acid rain began falling from artificial clouds. Predators attacked from every direction, sometimes in packs. But through it all, Jake never let go of the bundle. He took claw marks across. His back breathed toxic air that burned his throat and pushed his body beyond its limits. But he kept the holographic child safe. When the simulation ended, Jake was on his knees, bleeding from a dozen wounds. But the bundle in his arms was intact. The test of protection is complete, Judge Morthic announced. You have proven your willingness to endure pain, to keep the child safe. The chamber shifted again, and Jake found himself in what appeared to be a courtroom. Holographic figures filled the seats around him, representing humans, Zephyrians, and other alien species he didn't recognize. The test of wisdom begins, Judge Velsara said. You will be presented with moral dilemmas. Your answers will determine whether you have the judgment necessary to guide a child's development. The scenarios came one after another. Human colony. Ship and a Zephyrian research vessel were both damaged and drifting toward a black hole. Jake could only save one. Which would he choose? I would find a way to save both, Jake answered. A true protector doesn't choose between innocent lives. The Zephyrian war criminal was hiding among human refugees. Turning him over would prevent an attack on a civilian station, but it would also mean betraying the trust of the refugees who had helped him. I would find evidence of his crimes and present it publicly, Jake said after careful thought. Justice should be transparent, not based on secret deals. The questions continued for what felt like hours. Each one was designed to test his moral compass, his ability to think beyond simple black and white answers, and his commitment to protecting the innocent regardless of their species. Finally, Judge Morthic nodded approvingly. The test of wisdom is complete. You have shown that you can think like a true Shieldfather. The chamber changed one final time. Jake found himself back in the crystal facility where he had first met Kira, but this time, Zelenara stood before him in full combat. Armor, holding a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. The test of sacrifice, she said. You must face me in combat. But there is only one way to win. Jake was given a weapon of his own, but as soon as the fight began, he realized how outmatched he was. Zelenara was faster, stronger, and far more experienced than him. Her crystal armor deflected his attacks, while her weapon carved smoking lines through the air wherever he had been standing moments before. But Jake wasn't trying to defeat her. He was watching, waiting, looking for the moment he knew would come. It happened after 5 minutes of desperate fighting. A holographic representation of Kira appeared at the edge of the combat area, directly behind Zelenara. The Zephyrian warrior raised her weapon and aimed it at Jake, but he could see that the energy beam would pass through him and strike the holographic child. Without hesitation, Jake dropped his own weapon and threw himself between Zelenara's blast. In the image of Kira, the energy beam hit him full in the chest, and pain exploded through his body. But the holographic child was safe. Jake collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The simulation's safety protocols had prevented the blast from actually killing him, but the pain was real enough. "The test of sacrifice is complete," Zelenara said, her weapon powering down. "You have proven once again that you will give your life to protect my daughter." The chamber returned to its normal appearance. Jake struggled to his feet, supported by Captain Rodriguez and Sergeant Bennett. The Zephyrian judges were conferring in their musical language, their crystalline features serious. Finally, Judge Valsera spoke. "Candidate Jake Morrison, you have passed all 3 tests. But something unprecedented has happened during your trial." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "The soul bond has evolved," Judge Morthick explained. "Your willingness to sacrifice yourself repeatedly has triggered changes in your neural pathways. You are developing abilities that we have never seen in a non-Sephorian." As if to prove their point, Jake suddenly felt Kira's presence more strongly than ever before. He could sense her exact location back on the human base, feel her excitement, as she somehow knew that he had succeeded in the trial. But more than that, he could hear her thoughts. "Shield Father safe," her voice whispered in his mind in broken English. "Kira happy. Love Shield Father." Jake's eyes widened in shock. I can hear her thoughts. "The bond has become something new," Zelenara said with wonder. "You are no longer simply her Shield Father. You have become her soul twin. This has never happened between different species before." "What does it mean?" "It means you are truly part of our family now," Zelenara replied. "And more than that, you have become something that could bridge the gap between our peoples. Human, with Zephyrian soul abilities, could help both species understand each other in ways we never thought possible." Jake felt a warm sensation spreading through his chest. The pain from the trial was fading, replaced by a deep sense of connection, not just to Kira, but to the Zephyrian judges, and even to Zelenara herself. He could sense their emotions, their hopes, their desire for peace. "The trial is concluded," Judge Valsera announced formally. "Jake Morrison, you are hereby recognized as Kira's Shield Father and Soul Twin. You hold the rank of family bonded. In Zephyrian society, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails," Captain Rodriguez stared at Jake in amazement.
"How do you feel?"
Jake smiled, feeling Kira's joy flowing through their enhanced connection. "I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." As they prepared to return to their respective fleets, Jake knew that everything was about to change. He was no longer just a human soldier or just a Zephyrian Shield Father. He had become something new, something that might finally make peace possible between 2 species that had been at war for far too long. Through his bond with Kira, he could feel her excitement about seeing him again. But he could also sense something else, something that filled him with hope. Other Zephyrians were beginning to reach out through the connection, curious about this human who had passed their most sacred trial. Jake's return to the human base felt like coming home and leaving home at the same time. As his transport ship docked, he could feel Kira's excitement through their enhanced bond. She was waiting for him in the landing bay, practically bouncing with joy, despite her healing leg. The moment Jake stepped off the ship, Kira ran to him as fast as her cast would allow. He caught her in his arms and lifted her up, feeling her pure happiness wash over him through their connection. But there was something different now. He could actually hear her thoughts, not just feel her emotions. Shield Father came back, her voice whispered in his mind in a mixture of Zephyrian and broken English. "Kira knew you would. Bond is stronger." "Now, I can hear you," Jake said out loud, amazed. "Actually hear your thoughts." Kira giggled and pressed her forehead against his. "Yes, soul twins now," like Mama explained. Admiral Blake watched this reunion with fascination and concern. "Lieutenant Morrison, we need to debrief you immediately. The entire fleet is waiting to hear what happened during the trial." But Jake was distracted by something unexpected. Through his new abilities, he could sense other minds nearby. Not just human minds, but Zephyrian ones as well. Zelenara had come to the human base as part of the diplomatic mission, and her presence felt warm and familiar through the enhanced soul bond. Debriefing took place in the main conference room, now packed with representatives from both species. Jake found himself sitting between Admiral Blake and Zelenara, with Kira in his lap. The little girl had refused to let him out of her sight, and nobody seemed inclined to argue with her. Report Lieutenant Admiral Blake said formally. Jake described the 3 trials, but as he spoke, he realized that words couldn't capture what had really happened. The soul bond had evolved into something that both species scientists were struggling to understand. The connection is unlike anything. In our records, Dr. Wells said, studying his readings, Jake's brain patterns now show similarities to Zephyrian neural activity. It's as if he's developing a second consciousness that operates on their telepathic frequencies. More than that, Zelenar added, through his bond with my daughter, other Zephyrians can now communicate with him directly. This has never been possible with non-Zephyrians before. As if to demonstrate her point, Jake suddenly felt another presence in his mind. It was ancient and powerful, and when it spoke, the mental voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I am Supreme Commander Tholanara, the voice said in his thoughts. Sister to Zelenara and grandmother to the child you protect. I greet you, Soul Twin. Jake's eyes widened. The Supreme Commander is speaking to me telepathically. The room fell silent. Even Admiral Blake looked shocked. What is she saying? General Moore demanded. Jake listened to the mental conversation for a moment. She wants to meet with human leadership. She says the war began because of misunderstandings, and she believes we can end it through proper communication. What kind of misunderstandings? Admiral Blake asked. Jake relayed the question through his connection to Kira, passed it along to her grandmother through her own family bonds. The answer came back through the same chain. The first contact incident 5 years ago, Jake said. Slowly, the Zephyrians thought the human colony ships were attacking their research vessels. The humans thought the Zephyrian ships were trying to destroy the refugee fleet. Both sides were wrong. General Moore leaned forward. What really happened? There was a third party, species called the Vorthok. They attacked both fleets and made it look like humans and Zephyrians were fighting each other. By the time anyone realized the truth, too many people had died on both sides for either species to back down. The revelation hit the room like a shockwave. 5 years of war. Millions of deaths, entire colonies destroyed, all because of a manipulation by an enemy neither side had known about. The Vorthok wanted both our species weakened, Jake continued, translating the Supreme Commander's thoughts. They've been playing us against each other while they expand their territory in the outer systems. Zelenara spoke out loud for the first time during the meeting. My mother wants to propose a ceasefire agreement. Not just a temporary truce, but a permanent end to hostilities between our peoples. Admiral Blake looked skeptical. And in return, a joint military alliance against the Vorthok, Jake said, still channeling the Supreme Commander's words. The establishment of a new kind of diplomatic relationship, with soul-bonded individuals serving as permanent ambassadors between our species. Soul-bonded individuals, Dr. Wells asked. You mean there could be others like Jake and Kira? The Supreme Commander believes that the bond between Jake and Kira proves that our species are more compatible than anyone thought, Zelenara explained. She wants to establish a program where volunteers from both sides could attempt to form similar connections. General Moore shook his head. This is moving too fast. We need time to analyze the implications. But Jake was feeling something through his connection that changed everything. Kira had been quiet during the meeting, but now her emotions were shifting to something like excitement mixed with urgency. Kira, what is it? Jake asked out loud. The little girl looked up at him with wide eyes. Vorthok ship's coming. It's 3 days away. They want to attack while fleets are here together. The room erupted in chaos. Communications officers began frantically, checking long-range sensors while military advisors started shouting orders. How could she know that? Admiral Blake demanded. The family bond network, Zelenara said grimly. Zephyrian scout ships on the outer perimeter detected the Vorthok fleet and sent word through the telepathic network. My daughter received the message through her connection to the Supreme Commander. Within minutes, the reports were confirmed. A massive Vorthok fleet was indeed approaching, clearly intending to destroy both the human and Zephyrian forces while they were in the same system. "We have a choice," Admiral Blake said grimly. "We can scatter and run, leaving this system to the Vorthok. Or we can work together and try to defend it." General Moore looked around the room at the mixture of human and Zephyrian faces. "We can work together and lose. Both our fleets are destroyed. If we run separately, the Vorthok will hunt us down one by one," Zelenara pointed out. "Together, we have a chance." Jake felt Kira's small hand squeeze his arm. Through their bond, he could sense her hope and trust. She believed that humans and Zephyrians could work together, that the connection between species was stronger than the forces trying to tear them apart. "I volunteer to serve as a communications link during the battle," Jake said. "Through my bond with Kira and her family network, I can coordinate between our fleets in real time." The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Jake found himself at the center of the most complex military coordination effort in galactic history. Human tactics combined with Zephyrian technology, while Jake's enhanced telepathic abilities allowed instant communication between fleet commanders. Kira remained at his side throughout the preparation, her presence keeping him grounded as information flowed through the Soulbond network. She had become more than just the child he protected. She was his partner in building something new between their species. When the Vorthok fleet arrived, it found humans and Zephyrians fighting side by side for the first time in history. Jake coordinated the battle from the command center, his consciousness split between his human body and the vast network of Zephyrian minds linked through Kira's family bonds. The victory was decisive. The Vorthok, expecting to find two weakened fleets fighting each other, instead faced a unified force that anticipated their every move through telepathic coordination. In 6 hours, the enemy fleet was destroyed or fleeing in the aftermath. As both fleets celebrated their first joint victory, Jake found himself in the observation lounge with Kira Zelenara and Admiral Blake. The little girl was teaching Sergeant Lucy Davis a Zephyrian children's game, while Minette Tony Walsh tried to learn basic Zephyrian words from Zelenara. "The Supreme Commander has authorized me to sign a formal alliance treaty," Zelenara said to Admiral Blake. "She wants Jake to serve as the first human Zephyrian ambassador." Jake looked down at Kira, who was giggling as she helped Lucy understand the game rules. "What about Kira's education? Her development?" "She will grow up on the new joint station we're planning to build," Zelenara replied. "Learning from both cultures, helping other soul-bonded pairs develop their connections." Through the observation windows, Jake could see human and Zephyrian ships working together to establish the first permanent joint outpost. Construction crews from both species were already beginning to build something that would serve as a symbol of their new alliance. "6 months ago, I was just a soldier following orders," Jake said quietly. "Now I'm somehow responsible for peace between two civilizations." Kira looked up at him and smiled. "Not responsible, Shield Father. You just showed everyone what was always possible." As Jake watched human and Zephyrian children playing together in the station's recreation areas, he realized that Kira was right. The capacity for understanding and cooperation had always existed between their species. It just took one moment of selfless sacrifice to bring it to light.